Good morning, everyone. It's my great pleasure to share views, and particularly Asian views, with all of you. Which might be slightly different from the views from the U.S. and European countries. It's partly because the crisis not originated from Asia, and so as in many financial institutions, regulators also in Asian countries, including Japan and others, might have some slight views on a current regulatory tsunami now, arising from, Basel Committee and FSB. So I've been working for, the BOJ as a regulator up to 2008, but now moved to the private side. So I'm a little bit critical, I think, for the recent regulatory things, but it might be helpful to see more divergent views on what's now going on in the regulatory world. So this slide just showing you some categorization of the, various, different type of the regulatory trend. So just numbering from 1 to 8, but I just use two different kind of the yardstick. And this horizontal yardstick, this slide not showing you some letters and a horizontal line, but this meaning that right-hand side of this regulation, meaning that more inclined towards the post-failure of the pre-failure or pre-crisis kind of the post-failure crisis measurement. This left-hand side of the measures more inclined towards the pre-failure or the pre-crisis the kind of the measures. And this vertical line just showing you, I think, upper side of these measures more concerned with individual financial institutions risk management, and the bottom part is more concerned with the market regulation. So just using two different yardsticks and just categorize all this tsunami of the regulation into 8 categories, thereby facilitating the kind of some different impacts on the financial institutions and also maybe the regulation in the Asian countries. So this, ranging from the number one is, requesting the banks to have more capital buffer or liquidity buffer. So this is the center part of the Basel III. And number 2 items, I think, representing a kind of the systemic risk, the reduction. So this meaning that simplifying the banking structure and also requesting banks to have more bail-in capital or maybe drafting a recovery resolution plan. And number 3, top of this slide, just representing a risk culture, risk appetite framework, all these things. More so, I think, concerning more strongly with the governance, the risk management of the banks. And the central part of this slide just showing you, for example, evaluation of the current risk management, under the Basel II, risk management requirements. And also number 5, I think showing you the request of the considering the new risk, like conduct risk or the reputational risk or maybe other risk. And the 6 is the disclosure, and the bottom part is more concerned with the monetary market, the financial market overall. And then this, I think, table showing you how we assess the kind of the need of the global regulation. Based on on a kind of some positive factors and negative factors to have this global regulation. Not only US and Europe, but including Japan, China, or other countries. So for that, I just use the 6 different items for just assessing the need to introduce the global regulation. So first 4 items, it's maybe more positive factors support the kind of the need for the global regulation. And as the following 2 factors, it may be rather negative factors. So if you look at the first 4 factors, this may be, coming from, for example, the first factor is the current development of the discussion on the regulation. If, developed, if, the kind of the discussion is well advanced, this may be the positive factors. And second factor is consistency with the current regulation, meaning that Basel II or others. And the third factor is that if, for example, market was already be dominant by the, US and European kind of the market players and regulators, maybe they don't need to get an agreement from the other part of the world. So it may be more, positive factors to, support the introduction of the global regulation. And the last one is maybe the most important one is contribution to the financial system stability. And if you look at the negative factors, I think following two factors. First one is, of course, divergence of the views between the different regions, disagreement of the views between the US, Europe, and Asia. And the second one is, of course, this is also very important, cost to the industry. So this is maybe one of the most important negative factors. So if you consider all these positive and negative, and then see whether we really need the global regulation for the different category of the regulation, which was just shown on the horizontal line. So we suppose that, for example, some areas, maybe, we agree we need some global regulation. This may be the case of the, for example, buffer enhancement. This may be the first one. And also, I guess, I think in the market regulation, this right-hand side column is also, I think, showing you maybe more, need to introduce the global regulation. But I put some, the question mark on some areas. I'm not sure we really need the kind of the global regulation. For example, the area of the systemic risk reduction, or this part, just recently, announced by the FSB. TLAC, total loss absorbing capacity, and this kind of things, just caused a very, very big discussion in many countries, including Japan and others. And they just wonder, we really need this kind of the measures to facilitate the resolution of the big banks. Ideally, it may be okay, but there are many, many practical questions whether we can really do a kind of the resolution of the too big to fail banks over the weekend. And actually, many Asian countries, including Japan, had an experience of the big bank resolution. It's already more than 10 or 15 years ago. And we know that how hard it was to resolve the too big to fail banks over the short period of time. So from the feasibility point of view, I think many Asian countries had a big kind of the question mark on this. And another question mark is that, in order to change the kind of the regime or the regulation of the bank resolution, we need a strong kind of the energy, supported from the political side. Otherwise, it's next impossible to change such a very comprehensive kind of the regulation, which might affect also the resolution of the general corporate themselves. So without having such a strong support from the political side, it's very hard for many Asian countries to implement this kind of the regulation. So this kind of the environmental change, the difference in the environment between UK, US, and European countries and Asian countries also might be one reason why we could not strongly support the introduction of the global rule into this area. This may be the case of the shadow banking to some extent, in the sense that, maybe we not have a very serious shadow banking area yet, maybe except China. China, we've seen a very rapid increasing, expanding kind of shadow banking, but other countries' cases maybe not, serious case, partly because, I guess, maybe the case of the US and some countries, it's because that they now introduce very severe kind of regulation on a banking area, and they now just pushing the banking businesses, to shifting from the banking to shadow banking area. So this kind of the regulation impact is also, I think, causing a kind of the serious problem with the shadow banking, as it's not yet happened in many Asian countries. So that may be the reason why we not necessarily agree with the need of the introduction of the global rule. Another reason why so many Asian banks, actually, most of the Asian banks doing a very traditional, commercial banking. It's maybe in a boring businesses, but still it's very, very dominant, businesses among Asian banks. But I think all these kind of the new regulations were actually, I think, causing a kind of the big trouble for their businesses. Some kind of the requirement from the different regulation actually requires the banks to do a very, very, different rebalancing of the portfolio. For example, if you look at, for example, these cases, this is a high quality liquid asset. So now some regulation like an OTC derivatives rule or liquidity coverage ratio requires the banks to have more high quality liquid asset. But at the same time, other regulation like, for example, interest rate risks of the banking book, this revised rule not yet be published, but it's very likely to impose some capital kind of the requirement holding on these kind of assets. And also leverage ratio, as maybe penalizing having too much, low return, high quality assets. So this kind of the regulation now requires the banks in a kind of the very, contradicting kind of reaction. And so it's very big challenge, for many banks. Of course, it's a challenge for many European US banks, but also a big challenge for the major Asian banks, which, usually just be involved in the commercial, simple, and low risk the businesses. And so that's another reason, this kind of the complexity might cause the life of the Asian banks a little difficult. And finally, this slide just showing you some light and shadow of the global financial regulation. Of course, we really agree with many positive aspects of this regulation. For example, this regulation now makes the too big to fail banks more resilient and also simpler and more resolvable, and maybe more forward-looking, and risk appetite focused. And finally, as this result, more tamed, I think. But at the same time, this global regulation actually become more, I think, regulators emphasize that they try to make this regulation more simple. But actually, what we have seen is more and more complex, complicated regulation. And also, I guess, as I told you, it's maybe more to some extent encouraging shadow banking. And this is a point I think it's very important. Is that I think currently regulated authorities now not discuss a lot about the root cause of the financial crisis. This is maybe macroeconomic imbalances, like the current account deficit and something others. But I think just after the crisis, they talked about this kind of the root cause of the crisis a little. But they seem to now forget at all these things. So without this discussion, I'm not sure it's really be effective to, just to stop the next crisis just by using all these kind of the measures. And finally, more dependent on the market sentiment or risk. It's partly because now regulators, I think, restricts the kind of the banks to take the kind of the big trading position against the market, hardening behaviors. So in this sense, market tends to be more and more volatile, and their kind of the liquidity tends to be, gone. So, we will see more unstable kind of the market, partly because of the maybe trading regulation. So all these kind of the negative, I think, aspect of the regulation, I think also you should to be, bear in your mind when assessing the risk of the banks, particularly in the case of the maybe other countries, outside Europe and US. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you.